Nora Cahill's husband dies on a Wednesday in September. The studio sends flowers. A man from the production office drives out to the house on Thursday with an envelope. He is polite about it. He sets it on the kitchen table and explains what it means and shakes her hand and is gone before the neighbors arrive. Inside the envelope is a check for $1,400. Nora Cahill sits at that table with the envelope in her hands for a long time, and she does not open the curtains, and she does not eat, and the flowers from the studio sit on the counter in their paper wrapping because she has not found a vase. 14 years Ray Cahill worked the pictures. 14 years of falls and drags and horsework. Every job done right. Every director's problem solved. A man in a production office on the Burbank lot was going to hear about that envelope. He just didn't know it yet. Here is the story. Raymond Cahill had come to Hollywood from Tulare County in 1944 with a good seat on a horse, a tolerance for altitude, and no strong feelings about being hurt. He had grown up on a cattle operation in the San Joaquin Valley, the second of 4 boys. And by the time he was 16, he could rope and drag and fall off a moving animal and get up without anyone around him losing their composure. That was the whole qualification in those years. That and being the right size to double for the man whose name was on the marquee. He had doubled in 31 pictures. Westerns, mostly, but anything that needed a man who could take a hit at speed and not make the director reshoot. He had worked for 6 studios. He had worked in Nevada and Utah and the hill country of southern Arizona. He had broken his left wrist in 1949 on a Paramount picture. A drag sequence that went longer than the director intended, and he had wrapped it himself and finished the day and seen a doctor on Monday. He had broken 2 ribs on a Republic production in 1952 and worked the following week. He never filed a compensation claim. It was not the kind of thing men in his line did in those years, and Ray Cahill was not the kind of man who would have anyway. Nora had married him in 1946 at a church in Fresno, with both their families present and a reception in her parents' backyard and a used Ford that needed work. She had known what the work was when she married him. He had been plain about it. She had made the calculation a woman makes when she loves a man who does a dangerous thing, and she had decided the man was worth the calculation, and she had not looked back. They had 3 children, Margaret, who was 11, Dennis, who was 9, Louise, who was 6. Ray Cahill died on the 14th of September 1958 on a Universal picture being shot in the dry hills above Simi Valley. A horse fall, a standard piece of work Ray had done dozens of times. The horse came down wrong. The doctor on set was there in under a minute. Ray was gone before they reached the hospital. He was 38 years old. He had 14 years in the pictures and no union contract and no pension and no insurance beyond what a man could scrape together on Stuntman's day rates, which were not the kind of rates a man scraped much together on. The $1,400 in the envelope was the remainder of his contracted days on the picture, plus what the production office called a goodwill consideration. Nora did not know, sitting at that table on Thursday afternoon, that John Wayne had been on the Universal lot that morning for a production meeting on a picture of his own. She did not know that a grip named Al, who had worked with Ray on 2 different pictures, had told Wayne what happened, standing outside a stage door. In the plain words a working man uses when a working man he respected is gone. She did not know that Wayne had asked a single question before he walked back inside. The question was, what did they send her? Here is the story no one told. The call came on Friday morning. Nora was at the kitchen table again, the same table, working through the papers a woman works through when a husband dies and the world does not stop requiring things of her. Birth certificates. A savings book. A folder of receipts she did not fully understand. The phone was on the wall beside the refrigerator, and when it rang, she almost didn't answer it. The man on the other end said his name, and she recognized it the way you recognize something you were not expecting and are not prepared for. She said she thought there had been a mistake. He said there hadn't. He said he was sorry about Ray. He said it the way a man says it when he means it and knows that meaning it doesn't help, and says it anyway. Because the alternative is not saying it. Then he said, "I need you to tell me something, if you're able. Did you sign anything they brought out to you?" She said no. She had not signed anything. The check was still in the envelope. He was quiet for a moment. He said, "Good. Don't sign it and don't cash it. I'm going to make some calls." She said, "Mr. Wayne, I don't want," he said. "Ray doubled me on 3 pictures. The fall that broke his wrist in 49, that was my fall. The director wanted another take, and I said 1 was enough, and then I went and sat in my chair. Ray went back up and took that second fall and broke his wrist doing it." He paused. "I've been sitting in that chair for 9 years. I owe Ray Cahill a debt I didn't pay while he was alive. You're going to let me pay it." She didn't say anything. He said, "Is there someone who can sit with you today?" She said her sister was coming from Fresno. He said that was good. He said he would be in touch. If you've ever had someone carry a weight for you that you didn't know they'd been carrying, someone who just showed up, no explanation, and did the thing that needed doing, drop a comment below. Drop your state. This one's for the Rays. Every one of them. What happened next took 11 days. Wayne's attorney, a man named Gerald Marsh, who had an office on Wilshire Boulevard and had handled Wayne's affairs since 1951, placed the first call to Universal's Business Affairs Department on Friday afternoon. The call was returned by a senior man named Fowler, who was polite and expressed his condolences and explained the parameters of the goodwill consideration and the limits of the studio's contractual obligation to day players who worked without a guild agreement. Gerald Marsh listened to all of that. Then he said that Mr. Wayne would appreciate a revised offer by the following Wednesday, and that the revised offer should reflect the full replacement value of 14 years of work, calculated at guild scale, plus an annuity sufficient to educate 3 children through 4 years of college each, plus a monthly stipend of $350 for a period of not less than 15 years. Fowler said that was not a conversation he was authorized to have. Marsh said he understood that, and that he would hold while Fowler found someone who was. He held for 22 minutes. The man who came back to the phone was not Fowler. The revised offer arrived by courier at Nora Cahill's house on the following Thursday. She read it at the kitchen table. It took her a long time to get through it, because the numbers were not numbers she had ever seen in a document with her name on it. The total was $43,000 in a structured settlement. $12,000 paid immediately. The remainder in monthly disbursements over 12 years. A separate education provision for each of the 3 children, funded through a trust and administered by a bank in Los Angeles. A letter on studio stationery, signed by a vice president, expressing the studio's recognition of Raymond Cahill's 14 years of contribution to the craft of motion picture production. She read it again. She sat for a long time. Then she went to the window and stood there with the document in her hands and looked out at the yard, where Dennis was throwing a ball against the fence the way he had been doing every afternoon since Thursday. The same rhythm, the same throw, the same pause before he caught it on the way back. She called Wayne's office the next morning. She got through to a secretary who said Mr. Dunn. Wayne was on location in Arizona, but that she would pass along the message. She said, "Tell him Nora Cahill called. Tell him the answer was yes. And tell him," she stopped, "just tell him yes." The secretary said she would pass it along. Nora Cahill raised her 3 children in that house in Burbank. The $12,000 paid off what was owed on it and left enough to replace the furnace, which had been unreliable since the previous winter. The monthly disbursements came on the first of every month for 12 years, as the documents said they would. And Nora worked as a bookkeeper for a hardware supplier on San Fernando Road. And between the two things, she kept the house and kept the children in school and kept going, which was the whole job, and she knew it. Margaret graduated from Cal State in 1969 with a degree in education and taught third grade in the Burbank School District for 31 years. Dennis studied engineering at UCLA on the education provision and went to work for a firm in Pasadena that did bridge and highway work. Louise became a nurse. She worked labor and delivery at a hospital in Glendale for 27 years. And the thing she told her own children when they were old enough to hear it was that her father had been a man who did hard work quietly and never made anything out of it, and that someone had remembered that when it mattered. Louise's son, a young man named Thomas, went into the film business. Not stunts. Cinematography. He worked his first union job in 1994 on a picture shooting in New Mexico, and he knew when he signed his first contract what a union contract meant, because his grandmother had told him the whole story. The envelope, the phone call, the 11 days, when he was 17 years old and talking about whether Hollywood was a place that treated working people fairly. Nora had told him, "It depends on who is watching." Thomas has been working steadily since. He joined the union in 1993 and has been a shop steward in his local for the past 11 years. He has sat across the table from production offices in 11 different contract negotiations. He has never lost his composure at the table. He says that comes from knowing the difference between what a system offers when no one is watching and what it will do when someone decides to watch. In a house in Burbank that was sold in 1991 after Nora died, there had been a drawer in the kitchen where she kept the things that mattered. Insurance papers. The children's immunization records. The document from Universal Pictures, folded twice along the original creases, still legible after 30 years. And beneath it, the check for $1,400, still in the envelope, never opened, never cashed. She had kept it the way you keep evidence of something, not out of bitterness, out of the conviction that the distance between that envelope and the settlement document was a distance worth remembering. The distance between what a system offers when no one is watching and what it will do when the right man picks up a phone. John Wayne never told anyone about the call to Universal, or about Gerald Marsh, or about Nora Cahill. Not to a director, not on a set, not in any interview anybody ever turned up. He made the calls, and he let his attorney make the calls, and he went back to Arizona and finished his picture and never mentioned it. He was the kind of man who understood that the people doing the dangerous work on a film set were not background. That the man who took the second fall so the director could have another take, the man who wrapped his wrist and worked Monday, had done something that the credits would never name and the studio would never account for, unless someone made them. He noticed what was owed, and he paid it. The check for $1,400 sat in that drawer for 30 years, never cashed. The world doesn't always remember what it owes, but sometimes one man does. If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't yet. There are more stories like this one, and every one of them deserve to be told. And unfortunately, they don't make men like John Wayne anymore.